This week we're studying the history of pharmacy and its evolving scope of practice. So in this video module I want to look at pharmaceutical beginnings and the emergence of a distinct profession of pharmacy. You know, we really feel like mankind has used medications, be they crude in early days, to treat diseases throughout our history. For example, this image that you see on our screen right now is Shindar Cave from what is now called Iraq, around 30,000 BC. And in archaeological digs in Shindar Cave, herbal medications or herbal plants that could be used as medications were discovered. This quote by Gregory Higby kind of nails what I really believe to be true, that the very concept of influencing bodily functions via an outside force must be considered one of humanity's greatest advances. In fact, Dr. Higby also says to us that he believes that the use of medications is a unique characteristic of Homo sapiens, that the fact that we use these medications is unique to our species. So, it goes back a long time, and what I wanted to tell you is we're going to spend about 10 to 15 minutes here in this video module thinking about the history of pharmacy, woefully too little time to do so. I will direct you to several books that we've provided on the website in terms of books you might want to read if you want to learn more. This big fat book here I have in my hand is called Kremers and Erdang's History of Pharmacy. It's probably the classic book on the history of this profession. And if you want to go in much more depth into this topic than I'm about to do, I invite you to consider reading Kremers and Erdang's History of Pharmacy. Also, a much smaller in scope book that's helpful in terms of American history. This is called American History, a collection of historical essays, also listed on our website in terms of things that you could read optionally if you would like to learn more. Both of these books are published by the American Institute on the History of Pharmacy. So, we're going to focus for just a few minutes on a topic that takes up entire courses, quite frankly. I want to try to give you a brief introduction to this field, the history of this field. And what I'd like to do first is to think about Hygeia, who is kind of historic and symbolic significance out of Greek mythology. And then I want to think about three people throughout history who have had an influence on how we conceptualize disease and how we use medications to treat it. So let's think first about Hygeia. Hygeia was the daughter of Asclepius, who was the Greek god of medicine and healing. This was, influential around 7th century BC. And Hygeia was considered to be more interested in wellness and in good hygiene. Hygeia is known to have carried a magical bowl with a magical serpent that you see in the image in front of you now. And this is of symbolic importance to me because if we think about Asclepius, the Greek god of healing, Asclepius's magical staff and healing serpent became an international symbol for medicine. You've seen the staff with the snake wrapped around it. This image you see in front of you here, the bowl of Hygeia, this is Hygeia's bowl with the magical serpent. It has become an international symbol for the profession of pharmacy. So you'll see this image on our slides throughout the course. You'll see some images here of some statues and paintings of Hygeia from Greek mythology. Now let's think about several kind of characters in history that I think, and there are many hundreds that we could study. I've picked three that I'm going to share with you today. The first of these is Claudius Galenus, who is better known as Galen. Galen was a Roman physician. He was a personal physician to several emperors, originally Marcus Aurelius. When I think about Marcus Aurelius, I always think about the popular movie Gladiator. And if you remember, the Gladiator served Marcus Aurelius first, who was the emperor at the time. So if we put this in the context of something that we've seen in popular culture. Galen is known to have described more than 400 different medications. He espoused what was called a humoral system. It was popular at the time of their understanding of what caused diseases, meaning that there were 4 major humors in the body, and if they got out of balance, one got high or one got low, that caused sickness, and they would try to treat that imbalance. And then these 400 medications that he described and prepared were crude extractions, usually from plant sources, that we've come to call galenicals. That will be one of our pharmacy fundamentals for this video recording. And Galen has been known as one of the fathers of pharmacy. So here's Galen, 1st, 2nd century AD, father of pharmacy, and really the things that Galen espoused, the humoral system and the use of glycols, dominated medicine for centuries. And it was not until this young man became popular, Paracelsus, in the 16th century that things started to change. So let me give you Paracelsus's full name. Philippus Aureolus Theophrastus Bombastus von Hohenheim. I love his name. He's a Swiss-born physician. He was a philosopher, a social theorist, an alchemist, an astrologer, and a rabble-rouser, is the way they describe him. I'd like to learn more about Paracelsus in my life. It'd be an interesting guy to meet. I think Paracelsus is very significant in our discussion because unlike Galen, who thought disease was due to an imbalance of humors, Paracelsus thought that there was a localized abnormality in the body, and furthermore, that localized abnormality could be treated chemically. So he espoused a chemical philosophy of disease and its treatment, which really fundamentally changed how we thought about medicine and how we thought about medications. Those thoughts were expanded even further in the 20th century by a German physician called Paul Ehrlich. And Paul Ehrlich is famous for searching for what he called the magic bullet. So he was trying to take this thought of Paracelsus even farther and saying, could we find this magic bullet that would go to this abnormality in the body and affect it only, and really help us stay healthier. Let me tell you a little bit more about Paul Ehrlich. He tested hundreds of compounds. He was looking for treatments for sleeping sickness and syphilis. He was using dyes and stains and trypanosomes, which caused sleeping sickness. The 606th compound that he tested proved effective in killing these spirochetes, which caused syphilis and sleeping sickness. This new drug, called Salvarsan, catalyzed a fundamental change in how we view medication therapies, using these chemicals and creating medications to try to find that magic bullet. Paul Ehrlich has been known and come to be known as the father of chemotherapy. So let's think about that word chemotherapy just for a minute. In this context, we're thinking of chemotherapy as chemicals used as therapy. Now, in our culture in the United States, typically when we say chemotherapy, usually it brings up a thought about cancer treatment. And when I'm undergoing chemotherapy, that usually means I'm being treated for cancer. But if we broaden that definition a bit, chemotherapy really means using chemicals to treat. Well, throughout the Middle Ages, we see that, and into the Middle Ages, that the practices of pharmacy and medicine were really indistinguishable. So the physician and the pharmacist was really the same person. And it was really in Arabic civilization, specifically localized in Baghdad around 400 to 900 AD, that we first started to see the emergence of an independent practice of pharmacy where the pharmacist was independent from the physician. And then in the Roman Empire in the 13th century, Frederick II issued an edict which became known as the Magna Carta of pharmacy, which codified its independent identity and really put that into regulation. And this Magna Carta of pharmacy, if you will, had rules about the regulation of the pharmacy, how many pharmacies there could be, pricing. It was really quite a regulatory piece of history. When we think about apothecaries, and there's another pharmacy fundamental for you in this recording, apothecaries in olden times and even early America were kind of amalgamations of the pharmacist and the physician. Again, same person is kind of diagnosing diseases and issuing treatments and dispensing medications, if you will. And patients went to the apothecary in early times when they couldn't afford to go to the more expensive university-trained physicians. Well, I want us to think about apothecaries and think about our current emphasis on collaborative practice. And we're going to talk about collaborative practice a lot in the next 7 weeks. And that is that, now the pharmacist, the physician, the nurse, the respiratory therapist, all the different players really collaborating together to try to make treatment better. And so if you think about that, the need for bringing together the professions again in our contemporary emphasis on collaborative practice, this issue of the separation of these professions continues to be a yin-yang back and forth. Let's think about our pharmacy fundamentals for today. The first is the apothecary. This was a general medical and pharmacy practitioner dating back to 2600 BC. The bowl of Hygeia was a symbol of pharmacy from Greek mythology, originating with the daughter of Asclepius, Hygeia. Galenicals are crude or impure medicinal extractions, usually from plants, originating with Galen. And then finally, I want to leave this question for you to think about in our discussion forums this week. How do we reconcile this contemporary emphasis on collaborative practice that I just described to you with historical trends separating these professions? So we've gone from trying to drive them apart, maybe to trying to drive them together. How do we reconcile that? I'll see you next time.